Hello and welcome to Six Pack. Today I'm going to start a new series, What If Deku Became Todoroki's brother-in-law? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Midoriya, you'll be the one to take that since, as I mentioned, you're better at math. Shoto said, I can take traditional Japanese. Izuku though nervous nodded, it's not like the ice user was wrong. Bakugo, not a chance, Shoto sighed in defeat. The three of them were currently at Endeavor's hero agency, undergoing a work-study program. Needless to say it wasn't easy, keeping up with the #1 hero was a hell of a job. The three of them however were determined to get the most out of this opportunity. That would be exactly the case for our green-haired protagonist. After the day was over they were in a private vehicle on their way to the Todoroki household, where Endeavor was waiting for them. Izuku was visibly nervous, as he recollected his last encounter with the flame hero. Bakugo wasn't really one to show any emotions hinting at unease, although he had his ever-present scowl. After a little while, and some banter between Bakugo and the driver they finally arrived. They followed Shoto to the door and knocked, creak. After peeking out the door, someone jumped back to see her brother and two other people standing there. I apologize, she yelled, how rude of me, and moved aside to make room for them. Izuku examined her closely and, shit, they heard him murmuring something to himself, but it wasn't very loud. As they walked in, she introduced herself as Shoto's older sister, Fuyumi Todoroki. It's nice to meet you. The Pomeranian uttered, Katsuki Bakugo, in an oddly refined voice. The boy with green hair stammered out, Izuku Midoriya. Oh, I know you, she exclaimed with excitement, you're the guy who fought Shoto in the sports festival. As Endeavor entered the room, a heavy voice said, they'll be joining us for dinner. It became noticeably more tense as Shoto slightly glared at his father. Fuyumi sensing this intervened. So, you were kind to invite them over, Dad. Endeavor grunted, but it appeared that she knew what he meant. Was it always like this in their house? They dropped off their belongings and silently followed Shoto to the dining room. Dinner was a very quiet affair. Fuyumi attempted to break the ice with small talk but eventually gave up, as is usually the case. However, the awkwardness was more than doubled after Endeavor and Nitsuo, Endeavor's other son, got into a heated argument. Fuyumi glared at Nitsuo as she watched Endeavor leave the room, looking sad. That was uncalled for, Nitsuo retorted, he deserves even worse. Bakugo dragged Izuku by the collar out of the tense room. Thanks for the save. Izuku sighed and said, I don't think I could stay a second longer. Why did they even discuss such a delicate subject with strangers? The blonde let out a growl. They both cringed hearing another raising of voices before Nitsuo stormed out of the room, with Shoto closely behind him. Izuku kind of wished he hadn't accepted the invitation in the first place so he wouldn't have been pulled into this. Curious, he glanced back into the dining room and saw Fuyumi sitting there, dejected. A part of him just wanted to leave her alone to herself, after all it wasn't his business, but again. A hero is someone who meddles in people's business. He reminisced on when All Might said those words, at least he hoped that's what All Might actually said and he didn't hear wrong. Izuku's voice jolted Fuyumi out of her reverie. Well, are you okay? He asked nervously. She sniffed, yeah, just peachy. Izuku retorted, pointing out that she was crying, it doesn't seem like it. Who am I mistaking? You can see why I'm not feeling well. I just want everyone to get along because it's always like this. Izuku looked down, truly knowing what to say in this situation. He had zero experience in this department. I see can't say I understand your situation, but for what it's worth, you did your best. Fuyumi smiled a bit at him, mostly because seeing him all robot-like was amusing. She said, you're shivering. His head lowered slightly as he answered, it happens, I'm used to it by now. She chuckled. I appreciate you trying to cheer me up, thanks. Izuku's face had a hint of red dust. It's nothing. He offered to help out with the dishes, and they both got to talk a bit, before Bakugo joined them, not wanting to come across as rude. Thanks for the help you too, Fuyumi said, smiling at the two boys. They all said their goodbyes as it was soon time to depart. Thank you again, Midoriya, Fuyumi said, clasping his hands in hers. It was all too much for the poor boy, who did his best to hide his reaction. It was nothing at all, he was able to stammer out. Shoto waved his sister off and said, let's get going, we don't want to stay out past curfew. Izuku felt something in his hand when Fuyumi let him go. it was a piece of paper. Thank you for having us, Izuku said with a bow, and they all entered the vehicle that drove off. What the devil was that about? In a voice that only Izuku could hear, Bakugo inquired. Beats me. I'm as perplexed as you are, he whispered in response. They all headed to their rooms immediately after dropping. Ah. Izuku sighed, flopping onto his bed. He had been put through the ringer, both physically and mentally today. True enough, I forgot, he started, pausing to examine the piece of paper. It had a phone number, not just any phone number, staring at him. Todoroki Fuyumi. Wait. What? The following morning, Izuku sat in his room and studied the piece of paper bearing Fuyumi's number. He had no idea why she had given it to him, but he should at least save it. After a few attempts at shaking his head, pinching himself, and shouting the word Kai, he finally realized it was real, and a girl, no, a woman, voluntarily gave him her contact information. He laughed to himself and remarked, I guess that's all my good fortune gone for the year. He didn't have to worry about Iida rushing around trying to get everyone out of bed because it was a Saturday. As he typed in the number into his phone, the question hung over his head. Now what? Fuyumi was undoubtedly the most attractive girl he had ever seen, even though he had never really looked at girls before. Should he call her? She was probably busy and he didn't want to interfere, as if he wasn't already headed down the path of no return. The aura she had, the way she smiled, how her eyes seemed to glimmer. He had seen her before, but not in person. Needless to say, he was quite happy he did see her in person. Could he say he had a crush on her already? Probably. BZZT, crap. Before he could hang up, the call was accepted because he had unintentionally hit the dial button. Hi there. Hello. This is Midoriya, your brother's classmate. We came over for dinner yesterday, Izuku said, mentally cursing himself. Oh Midoriya. It's nice to hear from you. I was worried you lost the paper I gave you yesterday. In fact, she handed it to him. Permit me to ask, but why did you give me your number? Fuyumi was silent for a few seconds. You seem interesting, and you're Shoto's first friend, so I wanted to see for myself, you know. Me? Fascinating? Izuku said in a hushed voice. I think you'll change your mind about that pretty soon. How so? If Shoto feels that way about you, you must have something going for you. Perhaps you're just harsh on yourself. Izuku chuckled, not having an immediate answer. I have to go now. I'll send you a text, K. Bye. Beep. He thought to himself, she's way more energetic than I thought, kinda like Ashido. Izuku grinned to himself as he went downstairs to see his classmates going about their daily routine. Kirishima exercising, Bakugo shouting, Momo and Jiru in the kitchen, Mineta and Kaminari doing whatever they did every Saturday morning. It was a bit boisterous, but it was home. Iida said, Good morning, Midoriya. I hope you slept well. How about you? I did. It was splendid, Iida responded in his typical way. Would you like some tea, Midoriya? Momo asked from the kitchen. He walked over and sat down, saying, I would, thank you. A few minutes later, Momo slid his cup over to him. I do hope it's to your liking. Thank you, Yaoyorozu, he said, taking a sip. Just then his phone buzzed. BZZT. He opened it to see Fuyumi's message. Todoroki-san. I apologize. I had to be called for an urgent matter, but I'm finished now. How are you? What are you up to? Izuku's female companions looked at him curiously as he juggled the phone and the teacup. What's making you all nervous, dude? Jiru asked with a raised eyebrow. It was unusual to see him on his phone. Is this a crucial message? Izuku quickly waved off the questions. I guess so. Someone is there. Important, he said, a little unsure. Momo was curious now, but she didn't ask any more questions, and Jiru simply returned to her previous task. Izuku kept typing and deleting until his body finally had enough and he hit the send button before his mind decided the message was inappropriate and erased it once more. Izuku. I'm doing well, and right now I'm not really doing anything. What about you? After sending it, he thought of one word. Lame. A few seconds later, his phone buzzed once more. Todoroki-san. It's been quite busy lately, so I'm happy to be free of schoolwork today. Izuku. I get that, we also have been pushed harder by the school. Todoroki-san. Yeah, Shoto has mentioned that recently. I think it's because of All Might's retirement and all. Izuku. It's likely that villain attacks have been occurring more frequently lately. Todoroki-san. Huh. I actually thought you'd stutter over text. I'm kind of bummed out. Izuku. I only do that in person. I'm not the best when it comes to people. Todoroki-san. Hello. I understand that this is a complete surprise, but would you be interested in getting together? Izuku's startled yell caught his classmate's attention. Something wrong, Midoriya? His classmate inquired, somewhat alarmed by his unexpected outburst. Not at all. I'm fine. He looked down at the screen, sighed, and answered almost too quickly. Izuku. What are you thinking of? How did I end up in this situation? Izuku was standing in the middle of one of the major malls in the surrounding area. He was a good distance away from school and was currently waiting for Fuyumi, hoping he didn't get the wrong mall. Yes, he looked at his phone once more. He told himself, this is definitely the right place. He heard a shuffle of fast-paced footsteps behind him and turned to see Fuyumi lightly running towards him. Hey Midoriya, sorry I'm late. I hope you didn't have to wait long. Taking a few moments to catch her breath, she asked anxiously. Now Izuku was by no means a pervert, but come on. Any sane man would be caught off guard by her very endowed figure, especially the jigglies. He watched her exhale in relief as he said, no, I got here like 5 minutes ago. I'm so grateful. Now let's get to it, she said, turning in a particular direction and motioning for him to follow her. Izuku quirked an eyebrow. What exactly is G get to W? A little perplexed, he asked. Fuyumi then realized she never explained anything to him and facepalmed. I apologize. I needed assistance shopping and couldn't ask Dad or Natsuo because I'm such a scatterbrain. Shoto never concurs, so you're on your own. Izuku felt a bit of relief, then disappointment. He was half expecting a date, but again he wasn't expecting one. You'd have to be in his situation to get it, but he was happy regardless, so he'll take what he could get. I don't think why you know me well enough for me to accompany you on a shopping trip, he voiced out his concern. A tiny frown appeared on Fuyumi's face as she furrowed her brows, but it soon vanished. Don't you think we have plenty of time for that? I suppose so. What are you doing? He asked, leaning backwards due to her sudden closeness to him. Fuyumi was inches away from his face, although she was on her toes. You're taller than I thought, she pointed out. Izuku had a sweat drop. She really did seem out of it, in a cute way that is. He soon discovered why Shoto had declined to assist her after following her around the shopping center. Is all of this really required? Fuyumi didn't seem to be slowing down, and Izuku was carrying roughly 3 bags in each hand. This might challenge his one-for-all training, but maybe not. And completed. Izuku sighed with relief and thanked whoever was up there as Fuyumi proclaimed. As they were leaving again, all of a sudden, oh no. Fuyumi blushed in embarrassment and averted her gaze. I assume. You haven't eaten anything today. She nodded in agreement, but fortunately, a cafe was close by. Izuku also found out that she had a sweet tooth, as she basically murdered the cupcakes they ordered. He silently slurped on his iced tea as she finally noticed what he was doing. What's going on in that head of yours? He looked down at his lap to avoid her stare and said, I was wondering, how you're so free with someone you barely know. Fuyumi grinned at him. I believe I can trust you if Shoto does, am I correct? Thump. Thump. Yes, you can. He noticed for whatever reason he wasn't stuttering around her, maybe it was because of her laid-back personality, or something he himself was yet to discover. Hey Midoriya, I saw that you had a cover on your right arm. What's that about? Fuyumi asked, pointing at his covered arm. Izuku winced a little as the memories of all the times he had broken bones, torn muscles, and damaged ligaments returned. These weren't exactly his favorite memories. He said, injuries, and I'd much prefer if no one saw them, and the mere mention of them caused a noticeable flash of pain on his face. Fuyumi nodded in agreement, but she had to admit that the boy's quirk was by far the most powerful she had ever seen. She could see in the fight with Shoto that Midoriya held back, or at least wasn't using his full power, which was understandable. The backlash of his quirk was ridiculous, and the damage it could do was possibly even more ridiculous. It was terrifying, and she was grateful that he wasn't using his full power because otherwise her brother would have likely been dead by now. Izuku, on the other hand, was evaluating his circumstances, and he went shopping with her, and now they were at a cafe. Izuku bit into his cinnamon roll, with his eyes popping from how good they were. Plus they were steaming hot, even better. I kinda used my quirk back there, don't tell anyone, Kay? He nodded in amusement, though could see why she did that. No one likes cold pastry, well maybe Shoto, but he was a different story altogether. Has what happened that day been bothering you? Izuku inquired abruptly. I can't claim it has, but I have. I'm at a point where I could just give up because I don't know what to do anymore, Fuyumi said gravely. I don't think you should give up so quickly, but it's not my place to say anything. He smiled reassuringly at her and said, no matter the odds, there's always a way, in a voice that was unusually confident. Izuku blushed slightly as Fuyumi slurped her drink while staring directly at him. A small smirk grew on her face. I'll try, Midoriya, and thanks you. It's not an issue. I didn't mind, it's nice to get away from my classmates once in a while. I'll be more prepared next time, he said absent-mindedly. Fuyumi blinked, then giggled. Maybe next time? No. Didn't mean it that way. In an attempt to clarify his intentions, he exclaimed. Actually, it's okay. I'd like to do this again as well. Fuyumi smiled slightly and said, I know we don't know much about each other yet, but you seem like someone I can talk to, so if you don't mind, I'll be imposing on you a bit. I'd be happy to help. Izuku returned to Ua after they both went to the Todoroki home. Surprisingly, it was still afternoon. Hey Midoriya, where have you been? Kirishima asked, emerging from the corner. You just vanished. I had something to take care of back at home. Sorry for not telling you guys. Izuku told the truth. His phone vibrated in his pocket, and he took it out because he didn't like the feeling. Todoroki-san. Were you able to return safely? He smiled and texted back. Izuku. Thank you for today, it was enjoyable. Yes, I did. You know Midoriya, you've been awfully busy with that phone since yesterday. Are you hiding something? Mina asked, appearing next to him. He said, no, I'm not Ashido, hoping to end the argument before she started her ridiculous detective work. Maybe I'll spy on you till I find out, she said, putting her hand up to her chin in thought. Please don't. He went up to the elevator, and up to his room. There he pulled out his phone again. Todoroki-san. I should be the one thanking you Midoriya, for today, and when we do this again. When, not if, he thought cheerfully, wondering if it was wrong that he was beginning to like his friend's older sister. Natsuo emerged from his room at the Todoroki residence. Did Shoto come back or something? Fuyumi glanced over to him, still a bit mad at what he did. He sighed. Look, I'm sorry about that, Fuyumi. I was in a pretty bad mood, and things slipped out. Apology accepted, and no, Shoto didn't come home today. He arched an eyebrow. So why was that young person, Midoriya, present? He raised an eyebrow in question. She said absently, we went out for a bit. Natsuo smirked at her and looked perplexed before laughing out loud when he realized what had happened. You move pretty fast, you know. What's so funny? Over his laughter, she questioned. You realize what you two did was basically a date, and I think he was well aware of that, her brother said in between laughs. The idea caused Fuyumi's face to flush. I didn't know. He was so tense because of this. I even assured him that we would do it once more. Natsuo chuckled much to her annoyance. Well, whatever floats your boat, you've never been free with a guy that wasn't me or Shoto, so I'm happy for you. He laughed to himself as he walked away, saying, just don't fry the kid's brain. After watching her brother go, Fuyumi turned to her phone. Fuyumi. Did you realize that we essentially went on a date? The screen showed that he was typing something for a few seconds. Midoriya. I suppose I did, but I didn't want to cause any awkwardness. Besides, why would you go out on a date with someone like me? What did he mean by that? Fuyumi scowled at the text. Fuyumi. What do you mean, someone like you? Again a few seconds passed. Midoriya. I'm not particularly interesting or remarkable, I'm just plain and uninteresting. Fuyumi frowned again. This won't do. She had a feeling as to why he was like this. After all, she too had been bullied before for not wanting to be a hero like her father. Fuyumi. Don't say that, Midoriya. Although I don't know you well, I'm fairly certain that you do this frequently. You deserve recognition because you have a lot going for you. Do you think so, Midoriya? Fuyumi. Yes, exactly. How about we go on a date? Midoriya. Me? We, Fuyumi. You're foolish, but I'll show you that you're not dull. All you need is a little encouragement. Izuku. All right. Well, Fuyumi. It's settled then, remember that cafe? We'll meet there, tomorrow if it's okay with you. Can't have you going on a date in the middle of the school week. Midoriya. Makes sense. I'll see you then, I'm a bit tired. Fuyumi. Bye Fuyumi sighed, a little flushed. Although what she was doing was technically wrong and would be disastrous if someone discovered it. Who cares, really? Izuku let out a, oh man, sound. He was going on a date. Izuku Midoriya. Another dream? Perhaps, but right now, I couldn't give a shit. Throughout the day, Izuku's classmates kept an eye on him on his phone, noticing that he had changed a little, appeared happier, and was more in tune with himself. What could be the reason for all of this? They were still happy for him because he needed confidence, and it appeared that whatever secret he was keeping from them was the source of that confidence. Izuku turned to face Mina, who said, "Dude, you've been using your phone a lot lately." "Really? Yes. And you still won't tell what's going on," she complained. Izuku chuckled at the girl's antics. "You don't need to know that." For a moment, Mina was inspired. "Is it perhaps that you have a girlfriend?" she asked with a teasing tone. Success. Izuku started coughing and choking. "No, it's not that," he gasped. "Really? So why is there such a reaction?" "Well, UJ just caught me off guard is all," he said, waving her off. BZZT, oh yeah, he forgot to reply. Todoroki-san. Hello? You still there? Izuku. I apologize, I was being questioned once more. Todoroki-san. I see. I suppose it's becoming more difficult to maintain this small secret. Izuku. Well, eventually someone will find out. Ideally, it won't be Todoroki because I don't want him to think I'm pursuing his sister. Todoroki-san. It kinda looks that way I guess, though I don't mind. Izuku. Very funny, hee Todoroki-san. The whole Todoroki thing is becoming a little confusing, isn't it? Also, if you're going to continue, you should start referring to me by my given name. Izuku. Would you really allow me to do that? Todoroki-san. Yeah, it's no biggie. Izuku. Okay then tap tap tap. He looked at the name at the top of the screen and said, "There, all done." Fuyumi, she texted him again. Fuyumi. Are you finished? Izuku. Yes, but since it has come to this point, you are welcome to address me by my given name as well. Fuyumi. Okay then, it's a deal. By the way, I heard my dad talking about you guys coming for dinner again. Just hope nothing happens like last time. Izuku. Well, I hope nothing occurs. Fuyumi. I have to go now, school stuff, bye. Izuku. Goodbye. With a sigh, he turned off his phone. Hey Deku. When Izuku saw Uraraka, he raised his head. Oh hey, he greeted back smiling at his friend. You've been really busy lately. Is there a problem? She inquired, intrigued by his apparent sudden shift in attitude. Just work on your studies, please. Endeavor's methods are taxing, he remarked, chuckling slightly. Uraraka glanced at him. She could tell he wasn't telling the whole truth, but she wasn't going to ask. Well, you had better prepare yourself right away. You're going to be late, she remarked as she turned to leave. Izuku was so distracted that he had completely forgotten about time, and he leapt up to check the time on his phone. Already dressed as heroes, Bakugo and Shoto strolled down. Bakugo hurled his case at him. You're a lifesaver, thanks Kachin. He grunted as he passed them, saying, whatever, let's get going already. That's Bakugo for you, Shoto said. Izuku looked at his retreating figure with a smile. Wouldn't have him any other way. They got to the agency on time, lucky for them, and immediately joined Endeavor on patrols. By this point, all three of them were accustomed to Endeavor's movements and were pleased with their current level of development. Izuku had advanced the most among them, and it came down to one thing. Confidence. Although he was still far from being like Bakugo or All Might, the little self-assurance he had gained over the previous few weeks had caused a significant improvement in his use of quirks, surprising both Endeavor and All Might, who were perplexed as to how Endeavor was able to extract so much from the boy in such a short period of time. Izuku could now use Black Whip, one for all, and something else he hadn't told anyone about at a base level of 40%. Endeavor had noticed his advancement and was curious as to what caused it. Izuku sat across the intimidating figure of Endeavor in a nervous state. Calm down. The man said, you're not here to be questioned. Izuku spoke up after taking a deep breath to help him relax. So, what did you want to say, sir? After clearing his throat for a few seconds, Endeavor spoke up. Your quirk usage. You far surpassed my expectations since joining my agency, and I must say that I'm impressed with how much you've grown. However, something like this doesn't happen overnight. Has something recently occurred? Izuku froze. So should he tell him, hey Endeavor, I've grown because I've been talking to your daughter? That would be an attempt at suicide. Recently, I've been speaking with someone. Even though I'm not where I want to be, it has greatly improved my mindset. Endeavor uncharacteristically smiled a bit. You can now leave, which is good news. You'll have dinner at my house with my driver. Izuku got up and bowed before leaving the office, as he was about to close the door. Midoriya. Yes, sir, Izuku replied, turning back to face the pro athlete. I'm looking forward to seeing how far you go, Endeavor said with a small trace of a smile. Izuku gave a small smile. Thank you, sir. It was a very short interaction, but one that meant a lot to Izuku. Slowly he was improving, and soon he'd master One for All and become just like All Might. No, better than All Might. The driver dropped them off at the Todoroki residence. Shoto rang the doorbell and a few seconds later Natsuo opened the door. Oh, it's you guys. As they greeted each other, he said, come in. He scowled at Izuku and averted his gaze. Hey guys, welcome again. Fuyumi greeted as she entered the room. Izuku gave a timid, hey Fuyumi, wave. Dude, no need to be shy, she whispered to him. Izuku however thought otherwise due to the attention he was now getting from his classmates. Bakugo and Shoto both raised an eyebrow. When did it start? Fuyumi sat next to Izuku and nudged him in the ribs. He muttered, I'm not a big fan of that, to which she responded with a giggle. I'm just trying to push your buttons, she whispered back. You two gonna let us in on that conversation? Natsuo asked. Fuyumi interrupted her brother with a, I'd rather not, response. Natsuo made an odd face and said, oh I get it, while Fuyumi gave him a leg pinch. Oi cut it out, considering the circumstances, Shoto was the quietest of them all. They were also on a first-name basis, and Midoriya didn't seem to mind his sister's close proximity to him, as if he was accustomed to it. A tiny, barely perceptible grin appeared on his face. Dinner this time was lighthearted and they talked about various things, even Bakugo joined in on occasions. Izuku noticed Natsuo occasionally gave him a funny look, wondering why, but it made him a bit more nervous. He nearly yelped as he felt a hand on his. Fuyumi had placed her hand on his after sneaking it beneath the table. He didn't mind the subtle flirting, though it wasn't as subtle this time, and thought to himself, this is risky, but oh well. Surprisingly, nobody seemed to notice as the two of them carried on their thumb war beneath the table. They still had some free time before the driver was back, so they decided on some light training. I'll join you, we could spar a bit, Fuyumi said. Izuku gave her a funny look, which she pouted to. Just because I don't want to be a hero doesn't mean I can't fight. I'm Endeavor's daughter for crying out loud, she said rolling her eyes. The room was rather large, but Shoto dragged Bakugo with him as he moved to a different area of it. His senses tingled with something he couldn't quite put his finger on, but his mind told him to leave those two alone. Let's get this started then. Izuku's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Her sports bra did little to hide anything that would distract him, and her pants also hugged her figure, leaving him a bit red and bothered. Hello? Earth to Izuku. He was snapped back into reality as she waved her hands in front of him. I spaced out, sorry. Izuku took a stance after Fuyumi took a slight step back, recognizing that it was a Muay Thai stance. Heads up, I kick pretty hard, she said with a sweet smile. Oh yeah, it was all coming together for Izuku Midoriya. They had a little session, and true to her words she kicked pretty hard. At some point she hit him in the side, completely blowing out the air from his lungs. Imagine she kicked him in the balls. Jesus Christ, that would hurt. Hello, Fuyumi. Have you ever pondered what flying would be like? He asked as they were resting on the floor. Yeah, too bad I can't. It would be awesome if you could, though, because you would essentially be like Superman, she said, laughing. Izuku laughed and appeared to think for a few seconds before continuing. Well, I can't fly per se, but I can float, don't tell anyone. I'm still not quite ready to flaunt it. Startled, she turned to face him. Are you able to? Yes. I figured I could a while back, he said, scratching the back of his head. She was now curious, and turned to him excitedly. Will you show me? He nodded, and looked around to see if anyone was around. Shoto and Bakugo were too carried away, so the coast was clear. He took a deep breath and slowly rose from the floor, and she gasped. You're really floating. How does it feel? As she watched him spin around in midair for a few seconds before he steadied himself, she asked in awe. Izuku laughed, then thought of something. I have no idea how to describe it. You'd have to feel it yourself, as he said that black tendrils wrapped around her and she was lifted up into the air. It wasn't too high, but their heads touched the ceiling. As they swung idly in the air, she remarked, this feels amazing, though my gut isn't a fan. Izuku carefully lowered them to the ground, but Fuyumi, who was unaccustomed to it, stumbled and fell, dragging him along. Thud. Ow. That's gonna leave a bruise. As Izuku gazed into Fuyumi's eyes, they dropped, and she landed on top of him. Neither of them said anything, only small breaths. Izuku slowly put a hand on her to move her off him, hoping she hadn't gotten hurt, and feeling bad for letting her fall like that. Are you alright, Fuyumi? With concern, he asked. She continued to stare at him, and he was beginning to feel uneasy. They were inches apart, but because of the forces of attraction or some simple story bullshittery, they both drew closer. It wasn't long, but they both widened their eyes, realizing what they had both just done. This made them both turn beet red, and slowly Fuyumi rolled off Izuku, and they just laid there speechless. Izuku spoke up after a few minutes of complete silence. What just took place? Such a jerk at times. I want to simply destroy his. Yumi. You listening, Fuyumi? What? 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 A loud, somewhat irritated voice jolted the girl out of her reverie, and she smiled sheepishly at her friend, who pouted and blew the bang in front of her face. At least try to pretend you're not in that little world of yours, she said with an exasperated sigh. Fuyumi chuckled at her friend's antics and apologized. I apologize, Hana. What did you say again? She asked, chuckling a little, only hearing a few words, but she knew her friend was probably talking about a boy. It's my boyfriend, he's been getting on my nerves lately. Every time I want to approach him, he manages to ruin the moment. Like last week, even after all the signals I gave him, they all blew right over his head. Can you imagine? He's incredibly dense. URGHH, Hana whined. Fuyumi gave her friend a slightly amused look before blushing a little at what she had been implying. If she had to guess, the guy knew exactly what she wanted. Well, she couldn't even recall his name. Then it occurred to her that perhaps she was mistaken, but men were too skilled at acting unaware, just like Izuku the first time. Izuku. The red hue became more apparent to her friend, who was observing with interest, as she recalled what had transpired between them the last time they had seen one another. Not again, she thought. Mind telling me what's gotten you all lobster mode? It's really embarrassing, Hana, Fuyumi admitted, making Hana's eyes gleam with excitement, her mind racing through a plethora of thoughts before landing on her conclusion. Difficulties, boy? Fuyumi's suspicions were confirmed when she had a severe coughing fit. Spillgirl. I need to know who managed to break past your defenses, Hana said with a squeal and drew closer to her friend. I don't know if you'll be okay with this, Fuyumi said, looking a little concerned, and Hana gave her a really look. Right now, it might be a frog. Hana said deadpan, you've always avoided guys in general, so I'm at least curious. Fuyumi looked at her friend, a little uncertain but still trusting her, and leaned in to whisper it to her. You what? With a what? Shush, a person will hear, Fuyumi said in a harsh whisper, putting her hand over her friend's mouth. Hana took some seconds to calm down, then spoke up. I apologize for the response, it just took me by surprise. However, a high school student? And a first year at that. It's dangerous, but whatever, I'm glad for you, Fuyumi. Thank you, but hold on, why do you sound official? Fuyumi, you've never been anywhere near a guy that wasn't any of your brothers as far as I know, and if you're out here kissing someone then that's gotta be a sign, Hana said with a sigh and an incredulous look. It was an accident, Fuyumi said in embarrassment. Yeah sure. With a very suggestive expression, Hana remarked, but I do hope for more of those accidents in the future. Hana. All right, I apologize, I was just teasing you, the blue-haired girl said with a giggle. Fuyumi also joined her, this was pretty much a normal conversation between them. She looked at her phone, to the contact that her finger was hovering over. I'm curious how he's handling this. XXX. Midoriya. Hi there. Hi. Oh no. The boy jumped startled. Mina sighed and facepalmed, looking down at her previously occupied classmate. Class is over, and you have been absent all day. Everyone is going to the cafeteria, she said, gesturing to the other students leaving the classroom to get food. He organized his belongings and said, I'll be right there, Ashido. Mina sighed once more and walked out of the classroom. So is he coming? As the pink girl emerged from the classroom, Momo inquired. Mina sat down and said, yeah, finally got him out of his little trance. Izuku arrived shortly after with his tray and sat down without saying anything. Did something happen? Momo asked as the boy sat down at the table after getting his food from the counter. He raised an eyebrow in confusion at her question. Do I seem like something's bothering me? You have no idea? The girl said with a sigh. Sue remarked, she's right, you're pretty much out of it lately. Very much so. Iida continued, I sincerely hope it doesn't impact your grades. Izuku surprised them with a laugh. He made small talk with them, but his mind was in one place, one moment. The kiss. Even so, that was precisely what he and Fuyumi were doing. It had been about 2 weeks since it had occurred, but their relationship remained the same. It's not like they could pretend it never happened because it did. Their texts didn't stop, it wasn't awkward or tense, but he could tell that was on the outside. They both knew what happened, and needed to address it, or at least accept that it happened. Izuku. Hey Fuyumi, can we talk? She didn't respond for a few minutes, perhaps she was in class? BZZT. Or not. Fuyumi. Discuss. Izuku. What happened that day? I want to just pretend it never happened, but I can't. He wasn't sure if that was the right call, but he might as well bite the bullet and take the risk. Fuyumi. I guess so, I've been feeling the same way, but I didn't want things to get awkward between us. Izuku. I'm relieved that we're at least in agreement. Fuyumi. Is it okay if we get together this weekend and discuss it? Izuku. Yeah, sounds good. Lunch break is over now, I'll talk to you later. Fuyumi. Alright, see you later. He turned off his phone, slipped it into his pocket, put his tray back when he was done, and went back to class. At least he had one thing resolved, now the other. What on earth am I supposed to say? As exhausted as ever, Aizawa entered the classroom, looked at each of his pupils, and then finally raised his voice. Good morning, students. I haven't been around today because I've been busy organizing some forms. Take one and give it to the person after you. What are they for, sir? As she perused the information on the paper she had been given, Momo inquired. They are permits. Get your parents to sign their consent to this program, as you will be spending the remainder of the week at your work-study agencies. It shouldn't be an issue, the man said. Izuku's breath caught. If you include Sundays, that would be about 3 or 4 days. Oh man. He thought to himself. Aside from that, you have a small test today before you can leave. A little battle simulation to see how much you've improved since the start of the work-study program. Aizawa said, making the class light up with excitement and anticipation. Yeah. It's about damn time. Kirishima exclaimed excitedly, pounding his fists together. Bakugo also had a similar reaction, except that his fists produced small sparks. After a while, they were all set up outside at a sizable mock city, and Izuku was adjusting his suit when he heard a voice he recognized. Class B is returning for vengeance. You won't win like last time, Class A scum. Oh, that's wonderful. Izuku sighed. Monoma's here, and Shoto agreed. Monoma was probably the only person in the world that even Izuku couldn't stand. The man would just never stop talking. Hey guys. Kendo greeted. There were some lighthearted exchanges between the two classes, of course with the exception of Monoma. The boy was startled when a gentle voice said, Hello Midoriya. He turned to see Reiko Yanagi, the Class 1B resident ghost girl. Oh, hello Yanagi-san. It's been a while, he greeted back with a smile. To his bewilderment, she said, You look spookier than before. Spookier? Izuku scratched the back of his head and laughed nervously. I don't get it. She means you're way cuter than the last time we saw you, a familiar voice suddenly said, making the boy jump like a little girl. Gah. You should really stop doing that to me, Tokage-san, he said in a partly annoyed and partly tired voice. She was one of the few people who knew how to get on his nerves. A loud whistle caught their attention. Vlad King and Aizawa stood in front of them. Aizawa began, This is a test to see how your work-study experience has paid off in your progress, but his colleague's loud voice interrupted him. And it's also a class contest, Vlad King added. That as well, Aizawa said with a sigh. They were chosen in groups of 4, just like the previous time. The objective was incapacitation. First team to disable all members of the other team wins. Izuku sighed as the team placements were announced. We don't want you killing each other, so there will be a harsh penalty for excessive force, Aizawa said. Great, just my luck, Class A Midoriya Izuku. Honta Siro Hagakuri Toru Todoroki Shoto Class B. Nato Monoma Kodai Yui Honanuki Juzo Tokage Setsuna. Todoroki and Midoriya on the same team, drat. In all honesty, it didn't seem like a fair match, as some of the students cried out. Izuku was both a little relieved and concerned because it would be a major issue if Monoma could replicate Shoto's quirk. In addition, there was Honanuki to be concerned about because it was obvious what he was capable of and all of their opponents were threats. We'll win this, Shoto said, giving a small glare at their opponents. Let's do it, Izuku said as he prepared. Shiro posed a question as they prepared. So what are we gonna do about Mudman? Midoriya and I can go up, but what about you two? It's simple. I'll just take him out first, Izuku said in a strangely Bakugo-like manner. How you can embrace your inner Bakugo? Okay, sounds like a plan, Shiro said with a smirk. Hagakure and I will move ahead, then she can take cover and pick out anyone who's not on guard, said Shoto. The match began when the alarms went off. The words, "I wonder how this is going to turn out," were spoken thoughtfully by midnight. Class B was already on the offensive, as Monoma had planned, and he had already imitated the peculiarities of his teammates, so he and Hononuki immediately went after the grounded ones. Izuku and Shiro took to the air, and it was clear that this battle would be interesting. Just as I anticipated, Kodai now, Monoma yelled. A wave of enlarged barrels flew at them at high speeds. They both evaded, and Shiro shot tape at her. A hand came out of nowhere and caught it. Nah bro, that's not working here, the voice of Tokage said as an arm came out of nowhere and grabbed the tape. Where's Tokage? Shoto shot a huge wave of ice creating a barrier between them, but Monoma scaled over and softened the ground in an attempt to trap him. Shoto used his flames to shoot himself into the air and landed on a metal pipe. Shiro and Izuku swung around on the pipes. That was until Monoma launched another wave of barrels at them. I'll handle Monoma, you take care of Tokage, Izuku yelled to Shiro. Shiro immediately shot a flurry of tapes at the floating body parts. Shoto and Hononuki were in a heated battle. He could melt the ground, but Shoto could blast flames right through to him. He now had Monoma and Kodai to take care of. He dodged some giant spanners and then threw an air blast at Kodai, who got sent back. Monoma smirked and his body split into pieces just like Tokage. You Class A scum haven't been the only ones evolving. Grab this. All the parts of Monoma then shattered and each landed on different parts of the battlefield. Shiro, who was mid-swing, was caught off guard as the pipe he was swinging from turned to mush. I'm going down, he yelled to his teammates. Everyone in the vicinity, which was basically the entire field, began to sink into the ground. Izuku jumped with full cowling into the air and Monoma yelled. You don't have anywhere to swing from again. Izuku smirked at him. It was time to surprise everyone. Izuku went up, but didn't come down. All Might's eyes widened in shock. That's Sensei's quirk, but how? When? Midoriya can fly, was the collective yell from the other students. Even Aizawa couldn't help but give an impressed smile. The boy never ceased to amaze him. What? You never told anyone you could fly, Monoma yelled in outrage. This just threw his entire plan out the door. Izuku propelled himself with air force at an unprepared Hononuki. One for all, 35% smash. Izuku connected to his jaw, sending him flying into a pile of mush, knocking him out immediately. The effects of his quirk subsided, allowing the others to move around. Shiro quickly taped together Tokage's stray parts, and Kodai was frozen solid by Shoto. Monoma yelled, launching a wave of gigantified objects at Izuku. I've had enough of you. Izuku blitzed him faster than he could react and landed a solid smash right in his guts, rocketing him into the metal pipes behind and effectively winning the battle. Class 1A win. The speakers blared, indicating the end of the fight. All right, Kirishima yelled. As the injured were taken care of, Izuku was the center of attention, much to his displeasure, as he really wanted to be left alone. Why didn't you tell us you could fly? Was what everyone kept asking him. He was bombarded by his classmates who were mind-blown. Midoriya, that was a hell of a surprise you had for us. I must say I'm impressed, you've exceeded my expectations, Aizawa said with a satisfied smirk, and patted him on the shoulder. Thank you, Sensei, Izuku said with a smile. All Might put a hand on his shoulder, with a happy, but serious look. I'd like to have a word with you later on. Bakugo grabbed him by the collar. Why in the world did you conceal something like this, huh? I apologize. I intended for it to be unexpected, Izuku clarified. Please don't assume that you are superior to me based solely on this. I'm gonna surpass you, and I'll be number one. Kacchan, I hear you. Could you please let me go? He pleaded. Bakugo let him go with a grunt and walked away to prepare for his own match. Izuku pulled out his phone and saw the messages Fuyumi left. Fuyumi. Hello? You dead? Izuku. No, I'm not. We had a little test in school, a battle simulation. Fuyumi. Oh cool, so how'd it go? Izuku. Our team won actually, and I used my float ability today. It was quite a shock for them. Fuyumi. The shock must have been unbearable. Izuku. We recently learned that we will be spending the remainder of the week at our hero agencies. Fuyumi. Oh, guess we'll have plenty of time to talk then. When are you coming? Izuku. When we're done with whatever Endeavor has in store for us today. Fuyumi. Okay, I'll see you then. By the way, I'ma need some mochi, so could you get some for me, please? Izuku. What flavor? Fuyumi. Sakura, thanks a bunch. With a sigh, he looked up to hear a Bakugo boom, which was extremely loud. Fuyumi was in class, but in all honesty couldn't remember what their teacher had said 5 seconds ago. She had a very hard time listening in on what they were being taught, and found herself once again lost in the memory of that moment. It had been so unexpected, so unlike anything she had ever experienced before. And yet, there was a part of her that couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to feel those lips against hers again. She blushed at the thought, mentally slapping herself for such naughty thoughts. What's wrong with me? But before she could dwell any further on her conflicted emotions, there was a tap on her shoulder, pulling her back to the present. With a sigh, Fuyumi pushed aside her thoughts and turned to the person who had touched her. Hana scanned her friend's facial expression and giggled. What's gotten you so occupied? Is it who I think it is? She raised her eyebrows in question. Fuyumi nodded, unable to find the right words to describe the complex jumble of feelings churning inside her, but she couldn't help but growl at her friend because doing so would only make her feel more pressured. Suddenly, their school decided that he would be staying for the remainder of the week, and well, I'm anxious, but I promised we would discuss what transpired. I'd like to see that as fate, a golden opportunity. Maybe this is even some crappily convenient story, Hana said after listening intently and grinning toothily at her friend. Fuyumi sighed, but then was surprised when Hana became a little more serious. But really, you can't pass up this opportunity. I wonder if things will ever come together this easily. I'm not saying you should jump his bone, but at the very least, you two should accept your relationship. Otherwise, the little progress you've made could be ruined. Okay, fine. I will do my best. Not all of the work will be done by you. If he's even close to what I've heard you describe him, he probably has it worse than you, which makes it all too adorable. Two awkward lovers. Hana said with a giggle. Fuyumi, despite the scowl she tried to put on, giggled at her friend's antics. With Shoto, Izuku, and Bakugo coming over for the weekend to continue their work-study program with their father, Endeavor, Fuyumi realized that the time for honesty had finally arrived. It was encouraging to see that her best friend was fully supporting her, even though she was a little too invested in it, but Hana was right, they had to sort themselves out. We'll see when the time comes, she said with a distant look. Indeed, time would tell what would become of their relationship. XXX The three boys, Bakugo, Izuku, and Shoto, were positioned in front of Endeavor's hero agency, behind him. I'll be moving even more today. You three are capable enough to keep up with me, and that's a fact. Who knows? Perhaps you'll defeat a villain before I do. The three of them smirked, too proud of themselves that they gained the acknowledgement of the number one hero. As they expected, he blasted off, with them in hot pursuit. To another sidekick, Vernon remarked, those three kids are amazing. It was like a race, they would come very close, but Endeavor would just get there before them. When Izuku finally used his trump card, Float, Unexpected Endeavor, he was able to use Black Whip to capture a villain. Excellent Midoriya, and your new ability as well, I'm impressed you got to him before me. Bakugo and Shoto, seeing this, mentally steeled themselves to get stronger too. Izuku wasn't going to leave them behind. At least they were able to defeat Endeavor in a capture race, though it took some time. I'll say it again. Fantastic work today. No other sidekick has managed to do what you three students have. That's all for today. Keep up the good work. As he entered his office, he said, get your things ready, and my driver will take it from there. Shoto went into the room with him. Shoto? The boy usually refused to see him alone, so he was a little taken aback. I never intended to visit this place. I had to, but I want to believe I made the right choice. You and I both made mistakes, and the things you did to Mom will never change, but I'm grateful for making me stronger. I'm still angry, but I don't hate you anymore. That's all I had to say. Endeavor looked at his son leaving the room with a sad expression. He really messed up, and honestly didn't want to be forgiven. He wanted to be hated. At least he'd get to pay for his actions. Shoto. As Shoto left with a somewhat troubled expression on his face, Izuku grinned. He recalled the time the boy had brought it up in their conversation. Rewind. Izuku and Shoto appeared tense as they sat across from each other in his room. A hint of anger was visible on Shoto's face. Look, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, and it's none of my business to meddle in your family affairs. I also would never understand how you feel, but if you want to move on in life, you have to let some things go. Shoto's eyes hardened, and simply disregard everything he did? It was highly unusual for Izuku to sigh and give him a serious glare. He did bad things, that will never change, but it's clear as day he's trying to repent for his wrongdoings. I'm not sure why you thought I should be involved in something so delicate, but this is my opinion. I know it's difficult, but as I mentioned earlier, you have to let go of some things, not for his sake, but for your own. The endeavor isn't the same as it was. As long as you have this grudge, you'll never grow stronger, and like it or not, he's the only one who can get you to where you want to go. You said it at the sports festival, I have all might in my corner. Kacchan has best genist. If you don't have a mentor, you'll fall behind. That's the hard truth. Izuku had never been so direct and honest about anything, and what he was saying was true, so Shoto listened silently. Do you know why I've never mentioned my dad? Izuku asked abruptly, and now that he thinks about it, he had never mentioned his father before. He answered, no, I just thought you never brought it up. Kacchan knows what transpired. My dad left. After my birth, he abandoned my mother and me. Growing up the way I did, I needed a father figure, but I never had one, and I never even got to see him. Kacchan's dad was the closest to one, but he too was always busy. My mom would always give me a sad smile and assure me that everything would be fine when I asked her where my dad was, if I had one. At some point I stopped asking. I hated him when I found out what happened, but it was a burden. Even though I didn't experience what you did, I understand what it's like to despise someone. I may just be selfish here, but I don't want you to throw away something that I never got the chance to have. With those words, Izuku stood up and walked away from him. The end of the flashback. Shoto gave him a nod. He was going to try, as hard as it was going to be. When the driver arrived, he called them. Pardon me, sir. Could we please stop at a convenience store? Izuku asked. The man agreed and they drove off. For 3 days, Izuku grew increasingly anxious as they approached the Todoroki residence. They were dropped off and met Fuyumi outside. She greeted them and they went inside. Izuku handed her 2 packs of the sweet treat and said, by the way, I got you the mochi. The girl's eyes brightened as she saw the treats. Thanks a bunch, Izuo, it's so good, she squealed. He uttered the words, why yeah, you're welcome, while chuckling slightly. Natsuo wasn't home, so Fuyumi gave them a tour and showed them their rooms. She kept it a secret, but she saw that Izuku was occasionally staring at her with interest, and she reciprocated. Bakugo eventually just went to the training room to get some light training in, at least by his standards. Shoto was also busy doing something, leaving them both to themselves. Izuku was a little tense, not only because of the Fuyumi situation but also because it was the first time in a long time that he had been in someone else's home. This time, Endeavor managed to make it to dinner, but Fuyumi was taken aback when Shoto made an attempt to talk to their father. She grinned at his attempt. Even after Natsuo finally joined them, dinner was rather ordinary. Later that night, Izuku went into the training room. He did what he usually did, and some one-for-all training as well. Float wasn't exactly where he wanted it to be. He just let himself go and began floating around aimlessly, thinking about what he should say, or how he should bring it up. He was sure of one thing though, he wasn't exactly ready for something like that, but again neither was he when he received one for all, so that's that. A part of him wished she would bring it up first. He shook his head whilst steadying himself. He had to be the one, and he had to do it as soon as he could, because he didn't want the time he could use to learn something new be spent trying to fight his thoughts. After about 30 minutes of floating, his body had enough and he slowly descended. He sighed. He was getting better at hovering in a single spot, but there was still room for improvement. Maybe he would ask Uraraka to help him out with that. You're here, then. Figures, a familiar voice said. He felt Fuyumi's back against his. What are you doing? He asked. She laughed and said, nothing. This was just on a whim, but in reality, she was unable to look him in the eye, especially given what she was going to say. Izuku chuckled too, and could tell that wasn't the complete truth, but he was not going to say anything. They both fell silent. A few minutes passed and neither said anything. Listen, I apologize for what transpired. I didn't drop you carefully, which is why, yes, I'm sorry, Izuku said. Fuyumi was silent for some time, but she spoke up eventually. You don't need to apologize, I was the one who started it. I should have controlled myself, but I just did it out of nowhere. Izuku cast a downward glance. Well, that didn't bother me. Never mind, he said in a low voice. When Fuyumi heard him, she felt a little happier, and if she was going to be honest, she also enjoyed that feeling. She put her hands behind her next to his and said, "The feeling's mutual, Izuku. I have never done this before, so I don't know what to do," Izuku said with a nervous laugh. "Same here." Izuku let out a startled sound. "Why do you sound so shocked?" Izuku hesitantly said, "Well, you're beautiful, Fuyumi. I thought that you'd at least know how this worked." Fuyumi laughed a little. "Your thinking was incorrect. No one's ever approached me, maybe because of my dad, or maybe I'm simply not what they're looking for. I don't want my family to disintegrate because it can be lonely at times. I'll be by myself," she said. They both had another round of silence. Izuku mustered up his courage and did something he didn't think he had the balls to do. Man, he was probably using up his lifetime supply of good luck, but if it was for this, he didn't mind. He placed his hand slowly on top of Fuyumi's and relaxed when he saw that she didn't react negatively. "You aren't alone, Fuyumi. You have your mother, your father, and your brothers. It's not my place to say anything, but they all love you, in their own way. And if you'll allow me to be there for you, I'm here too," Izuku said, looking down and mentally yelling because he thought it sounded corny, like a line from a romance manga or something. "When I'm depressed," she inquired. "Yes." "Happy?" "Yes." "When I'm angry?" "Yes." "Are you hungry?" "Fuyumi." They both laughed at his answer. Fuyumi found her fingers locking with his, but neither said anything to address it. Their backs were still pressed against each other, but they didn't move. It felt nice, and looking at the position their hands were in, it didn't leave too much to imagine. "Izuku, well, can we try it again?" Izuku looked around, remembering that he was still in Endeavor's house, and he yawned and got up, popping a few joints here and there, groaning in satisfaction. It had been an eventful 2 days, and he still believed it to be a dream, a good one that he didn't want to wake up from. He and Fuyumi weren't official, but they hadn't acted that way either, and both were new to the experience. "Today's the last day," he said to himself. He slipped out of the bed and went to the bathroom, took a light shower, brushed his teeth and headed out for his morning routine. He assumed that Bakugo or Shoto was already awake because he heard noises coming from that direction. As he emerged, Fuyumi said, "Good morning, Izuku." Izuku grinned, albeit slightly flushed. "Morning, Fuyumi. Did you sleep well?" "Yup. Where are you headed so early?" Since nobody she knew was awake yet, she inquired. "I wanted to have a light training session, that's all," he said with a sheepish chuckle, and scratched the back of his head. Fuyumi nodded, though she was a bit surprised that he was the first one awake. Normally it was their dad. Come to think of it, she hadn't seen him since yesterday. She smiled at the green-haired boy. "Oh, I see. Please don't exhaust yourself before breakfast." To which Izuku replied, "I'll try not to." The boy's face was as red as Endeavor's hair when Fuyumi unexpectedly kissed him on the cheek and turned to leave. He was flustered, but couldn't suppress the stupid grin he had on his face. Nice, but unexpected, he told himself. He gulped as he felt the heat in the room and realized that the man had noticed him when he slid open the door and saw Endeavor instead of Bakugo or Shoto. "Gee, good morning, sir. Sorry for intruding," he squeaked out. He was about to close the door, but Endeavor stopped him. "Midoriya, please come in. I want to speak with you." Endeavor remained silent for a few seconds before speaking up in a surprisingly low voice, and Izuku shut the door behind him and sat in front of the man, who was clearly a nervous wreck, especially since he was now in a cahoots with said man's daughter. "This has nothing to do with heroes. Actually, I've been wanting to talk to you ever since the sports festival." "About what, sir?" Izuku asked, going through a plethora of possible topics, but stopped as his mind was not producing anything feasible. "Thank you for helping Shoto to accept his power. I was an ass to you when we first met, and I apologize for that. You have helped me in ways that you couldn't understand, especially when it comes to my family. The change has been something that I never expected, or wanted, but it is because of you, and you have my appreciation for that." Please, sir. There's no need for all this, and I don't think I'm important enough to be involved in your family affairs, Izuku objected, believing that he was unworthy of such kind remarks and that he had actually put his nose in the wrong place. "In spite of this, I still feel compelled to thank you because you have made Shoto and even Fuyumi happier. Even though I don't look the part, I love my kids. I regret everything I did to them and their mother, even though it took me some time to realize it. You're a good kid and you're also determined, and I'm honored to have taught you," Endeavor smiled. It's strange that I feel comfortable talking to you like this. I also appreciate your nice remarks, sir. It means a lot, Izuku said with a bow. Then Endeavor became more inquisitive and posed a query that Izuku was ill-prepared to respond to. Putting that aside, could you please tell me about your relationship with Fuyumi? Izuku's heart went cold and he froze in place. How did you? He stuttered out in shock. Endeavor laughed to himself, amused by the boy's response. Deduction is a fundamental ability I must possess as a pro-hero, and you just validated my suspicions. You're already on a first-name basis, and you two aren't really the most tactful when you're stealing glances at each other, Endeavor said, feeling slightly amused at the way the boy seemed to shrink with each passing word. They were discovered so fast, Izuku moaned. Fuyumi has never seemed at ease around non-family members. Although it's not ideal, I won't interfere in your relationship, but I will set ground rules. First and foremost, you will both keep this private. I assume you are aware of the consequences if your school or, worse, the media learned about your extracurricular activities. You and everyone else involved would have a terrible time. Don't let this stop you from making progress either. I want to see you only improve from here, and I will not tolerate you slacking off. Are my terms reasonable enough? Izuku gave a tense, "Why yes sir," response. I'm happy that we agree. What about a little spar now? Endeavor asked, getting up. I'd be glad to, sir. Endeavor had a thought flash through his mind. I see why All Might likes so much. As soon as Bakugo and Shoto entered to watch them sparring, they both instantly regretted letting Izuku get the advantage over them and sleeping in. Both of them stopped when they became aware of their presence. I'm glad you were able to attend. Midoriya and I were having a little sparring session. Do you want to come along? Endeavor inquired. Avoid using the number 1. Hell yeah, I'm in, Bakugo said, pounding his fists together. Shoto agreed, but in a more quiet manner. Izuku stepped back to catch his breath, letting Bakugo take over. They spent some time training before heading back and taking baths, then coming back for breakfast. Fuyumi sat next to Izuku as usual, but this time he showed no signs of nervousness at all. Shoto kept looking at them, trying to understand how and why they became such close friends so quickly. Natsuo, on the other hand, could tell immediately but remained silent. During the course of breakfast she slipped her hand under the table and grabbed his, but he didn't mind. It was something he was starting to get used to, hand-holding. It seemed so innocent, so pure, yet was the gateway to all things unholy. He shook his mind of such thoughts. It was pretty much the last day, so he'd get to enjoy the benefits of a secret romance while he could. Anytime you want, you guys are welcome to visit. I'm sure our dad won't mind. He seems to have taken a liking to you, Natsuo said as he left the house. The driver was already there. Shoto and Bakugo pulled their stuff towards the car. I'm leaving now. I'll text you as soon as I get to school, Izuku said. Fuyumi smiled and hugged him, though they weren't seen by anyone. Then they both leaned in and kissed softly. Bye Izuku, she said with a warm smile. Izuku dragged his belongings into the car and drove off to school, beaming with happiness. What took you so long in there? Bakugo asked. I forgot something, Izuku lied. Shoto gave him a curious look, but didn't say anything. He was starting to put everything together. The way they casually used each other's first names, how free Fuyumi seemed to be around him, and vice versa, and he could have sworn he'd seen them holding hands under the table one time, but that may have been his mind playing tricks on him. Izuku and his sister, it made him chuckle to himself. Although it was absurd to consider, it was frighteningly real. After arriving at the dorms and unpacking, they didn't do much with their remaining time. Bakugo went to bed, leaving Izuku and Shoto alone. Shoto was clearly considering something, and Izuku could tell. Izuku, he exclaimed. Yes, he gave a tense response. Are you dating my sister? Izuku mentally grimaced as Shoto raised an eyebrow, asking, what was with this family and their strangely accurate sense of perception? What gave you that idea? Izuku asked, feigning surprise. He didn't want another round of questioning, and also it was part of his agreement with Endeavor. Shoto laughed a little and said, I guess I'm jumping the gun there, but something told him otherwise. In any case, it wasn't his business, though technically it was because his sister was involved. The rest of the class returned little by little, until every one of them was back at the dorms. Most were relieved that they were back at the dorms. The work-study special program had pushed them to the absolute limit, and Aizawa didn't let up on handing them assignments even while knowing what they were going though. Dude, I really missed you all. Mina sobbed. Aizawa-sensei is such a slave driver. Sending us work-study assignments. They all laughed at their antics and were finally able to relax, at least until Monday, Toru continued, stretching idly. XXX. The sterile scent of the hospital room hung heavy in the air as Fuyumi Todoroki sat by her mother Rei's bedside. The older woman was sitting up and staring out the window, before turning back to her daughter, and something was different about her. Concern mixed with curiosity as Rei Todoroki spoke softly, her voice weakened by illness, observing the subtle changes in her daughter's demeanor, a lightness in Fuyumi's eyes, a warmth in her smile that hadn't been there before. Fuyumi dear, you seem happier lately. Something good happened recently, I presume. Fuyumi hesitated for a moment, her fingers fiddling nervously with the edge of her sweater. She hadn't intended to let her personal life slip into the conversation, but her mother's perceptive gaze seemed to pierce through any facade she attempted to maintain. I suppose I've just been. I'm trying to concentrate on the good things in my life, she said with a hesitant smile. Rei studied her daughter for a moment, a knowing glint in her eyes. You sure it's not something else? I can think of a few things, she said with a small smirk, and watched in amusement as Fuyumi shrunk even further under her gaze. Fuyumi's cheeks flushed slightly at her mother's inquiry, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over her. Perhaps it was time to confide in her mother, to share the joy she had found in unexpected places. Well, Mom, something did happen, something that made me feel happy, she said, barely raising her voice above a whisper. Rei's lips curved into a tender smile, a flicker of amusement dancing in her eyes. Oh, and who might this lucky person be? She inquired, her tone laced with gentle teasing. Fuyumi suddenly jerked at her mother's tone. Mom. Rei chuckled to herself. I was just teasing you, though I have a feeling you'll soon come clean, but for now I'll let you be. Rei put a hand on hers and spoke up again, and Fuyumi sighed with relief. Her mother knew how to get the right reactions out of her, but there was truth in what she said, and she would have to tell her eventually, though judging by her tone, she should already know what her situation might be. Perhaps they all had special senses or something. I just hope whatever it is, it keeps you happy. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the soft hum of the medical equipment surrounding Rei's bed. Fuyumi found solace in her mother's presence, grateful for the opportunity to share her feelings without fear of judgment. After a moment, Rei's curiosity got the better of her as she turned her attention back to Fuyumi. How is your father doing? She asked suddenly, making Fuyumi to raise an eyebrow in surprise. Why, are you asking? He has been coming over for a while now, and I can tell he is going through a lot, Rei said with a smile before turning to face a jar of gorgeous electric blue flowers behind her. We are coming to terms with what happened, and I think we should all move on from it. Wait, does that mean you? Yes, though I already forgave him a long time ago. He just has to forgive himself, Rei responded with a soft voice. A fond smile tugged at the corners of Fuyumi's lips as she began to speak, her eyes alight with affection. I really don't know what to say, Mom. Rei listened intently, a sense of warmth blooming in her chest as she listened to Fuyumi. It was a well-needed step in salvaging what remained of their broken family. She slowly pulled her into a hug. Fuyumi leaned into her mother's touch, feeling a sense of warmth and acceptance wash over her. In that moment, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the antiseptic scent of the hospital, she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As they sat together in quiet companionship, mother and daughter found solace in each other's presence. And amidst the hardships and trials they faced, they found comfort in the knowledge that love, in all its forms, had the power to heal even the deepest of wounds. Later that night, BZZT, Izuku reached into his pocket and took out his phone. Fuyumi. Are you free right now? Izuku. I guess so. Fuyumi. You're alone. Izuku. Nope, I have my classmates here with me. Fuyumi. Go to your room. Izuku. Seriously, Fuyumi. I can't possibly be seen by everyone, am I right? Izuku. You have a point. He chuckled and got up. Where are you going, Yo Midoriya? Kirishima inquired. I have a bit of a headache, so I'll be resting for a while. Okay man, the red-haired boy said with a slightly confused look. Although it was blatantly dishonest, he would do much more for his girlfriend than just tell a lie. He closed his door and turned on his phone, accepting a call, and Fuyumi's face popped on the screen. So what did you want to talk about? The temperature in Japan had begun to drop, the year was coming to an end, and they would soon be celebrating Christmas before starting their second year at UA, but first. Izuku sighed, we got the final exams to worry about. It had completely slipped his mind, which is understandable given how hectic the last few weeks have been. Agreed, we will have to study hard in order to pass comfortably, Iida added. Mina deflated at the mention of the word, study. It sent shivers down her spine. She wanted to prepare for the holidays, not be cooped up in front of some textbook. I detest studying, she protested. Well, it's either that or you get held back a year. That wouldn't be much fun now, would it? Momo cut in. Mina still whined about it, until Mineta spoke. Just think of all the things I can make you do as your senior. Mina abruptly said, let's study, in a serious tone as she became determined to ace the tests. Momo mouthed a thank you to the grape boy who snickered and walked away. As with most tests, they formed study groups. Students like Momo, and even Bakugo volunteered to help out. Izuku, on the other hand, preferred to study alone. It wasn't that he didn't enjoy being with the others, but it could get pretty rowdy, and it always did. He stood up and went to All Might's office, where they continued to discuss One for All. He heard, come in, when he knocked on the door. Ah, it's good to see you again, young Midoriya. Izuku sat down opposite his instructor. So you probably want an explanation about the whole float vestiges talking thing, right? He stated. All right, so how long have you concealed it? Sheepishly, Izuku laughed. Sorry about that, it happened around a month ago when I unlocked float. I came into contact with Nana, and I found out that the vestiges in One for All are alive. All Might also chuckled at this. I can only imagine having 7 people in your head. Izuku laughed and then winced, saying, well yeah, they're quite chatty too. That's a new for me. What else are you able to do? All Might asked. Right now I'm working on the 4th quirk, Danger Sense. It was pretty taxing, but I finally got the hang of it, though I'm not yet where I want to be, Izuku said. Additionally, you've used One for All much more effectively overall. I'd have to give credit to Endeavor. All Might grinned and remarked, he's a much better teacher than he comes across as. He has really helped out, especially in the mental aspect. I think I'm more confident in my abilities as a hero now, Izuku said, looking at his hands, proud of how far he had come. The kid who could only take one shot and would destroy half his body, to this. Dare I say you now got some balls on you. Letting go of your mental restraints is a huge step forward. That, in my opinion, is the primary reason why your use of quirks has advanced well beyond anything you have previously achieved, All Might continued. Izuku nodded in agreement. His mentality was the biggest improvement. Now he felt he could push, and he knew he was strong. So I'll ask you this question again, young Midoriya. Do you still want to be a hero like me? All Might asked. Izuku looked at him with determination. No, I'll be better. All Might grinned contentedly. That's a much better answer. He was genuinely relieved that the boy had abandoned his idolatry of All Might. While it was admirable to admire someone, it was incorrect to hold them in such high regard. Izuku was now on the right track, both physically and mentally on his way to becoming the world's greatest hero. The students of 1A prepared themselves as best they could for the final exams, knowing that UA never pulled their punches when it came to such stuff. When the day finally arrived, everyone was eager to advance a year, with some even looking forward to becoming seniors. Not to boast, but Izuku was the smarter student in his class, so he wasn't too concerned about it. The first test was math, a subject that most people dreaded and, to some extent, detested. He told himself, let's get this over with. That was how the entire week went. Fuyumi was also in the middle of her final year exam, so Izuku didn't have much time to speak to her. Finally, they were done, and the results were released the very next day. I succeeded. They were all going up a year, and Mina sobbed with happiness. Izuku smiled, satisfied with his results. He was placed second just behind Momo. Shoto looked at his and said, looks like you retained your spot. He finished in 4th place, but the standings weren't really important because they were only having a small competition. BZZT. Fuyumi. Hello Izu, I apologize for not being able to communicate for a while. Yesterday was the last day of our final exams, and I've been feeling quite exhausted. Izuku. It's okay, I was busy too. Things have been a little hectic because we're heading home for the holidays soon. Fuyumi. I know, right? It's so exhausting. Izuku. So, how's your mom doing? You don't have to answer if you don't want to. Fuyumi. It's no problem, and thanks for the concern. She's fine now, the doctors just want her to stay for a while longer. Also, my dad's been visiting her frequently. He's still pretty out of it, but they're on talking terms now. Izuku. I'm glad to hear that. Please feel free to discuss anything. Fuyumi. I understand, but in person, this would have sounded much better. Izuku. Concurred. Izuku, who was officially a second-year student now, tossed his bag in the corner and collapsed onto his bed, feeling a little unreal. This year had been one crazy ride for him. From a quirkless loser who had no one, then he met All Might, he gained one for all, got into UA, made friends for the first time in a long time, all the trials and tribulations he went through, all the broken bones and torn muscles along the way. He finally made peace with Kachin, and then the most astonishing, he got a girlfriend. Now that was something that if you told him a few years back he'd think you were mocking him. What a year, he snickered. They had no idea what was going to happen next. XXX. Japan was in a state of destruction and chaos. Society had been turned upside down by the just concluded wide-scale attack by the League of Villains, on not only the heroes, but everyone in the country. Thousands of lives lost, millions in terms of property damage, and the supposed victory of the villains. Shigaraki got what he wanted. The heroes were blamed for everything, and the people lost their hope in them. Heroes who did not have the will to carry on, soon enough turned in resignation letters and left. Even students were not left out of the destruction, as many were injured, some more than others. Bakugo had been in critical condition for a while after being stabbed in the stomach, but was now in the clear. Shoto had been severely burned, both physically and emotionally, as the renowned villain known as Dabi turned out to be his older brother Todoroki. Needless to say his family were now under major scrutiny, especially Endeavor, who got the worst of it. He was absolutely crushed, and wanted nothing more than to die in his anguish and shame. It broke the man more than anything had ever done before, and he was put in a grave condition. The press and the media however showed no mercy, openly criticizing not only him, but the entirety of hero society. The Todoroki family were in despair, each of them reliving the day Tuya returned in a way unbecoming of a hero's son. While this would have completely shattered the family, there was still hope for rebuilding. They could all see that Endeavor was the most affected by this, he now looked a defeated man. Shoto was also badly injured, but he pushed through, to see that his father wouldn't suffer alone. Rei, their mother, also took an unexpected stance in this matter because she didn't want to see her husband suffer so much, had long since forgiven him, and wanted her family back. Endeavor did wrong, but in his eyes, he had more than made up for it. He wanted to forget everything that had happened in the past, to let it all go, because without their father, there was no hope of stopping Tuya. Not only did Fuyumi have to worry about her father and Tuya, but she also had to deal with Izuku, who had gone into a coma after fending off Shigaraki. Her father was on the verge of a mental breakdown, her older brother was a deranged villain, and her boyfriend was in a coma. Her mother consoled her, understanding how much she loved Izuku. Rei, who now knew about Izuku, looked sorrowfully at her children, recognizing his influence on Fuyumi and Shoto, and prayed that he would awaken. 2 weeks had passed and he had not moved. Society had lost their faith in the heroes almost completely, and the peace that All Might once fought for was crumbling rapidly. There was also the problem of one for all, the truth had begun to spread, and people found out the villains were after someone in particular. It's all my fault. In a hollow voice, Endeavor declared, I'm a failure of a hero, a father, and a man. Rei placed a hand on his and gave it a comforting squeeze. Listen Enji, I know it's hard, but you have to pull through, Tuya needs to be stopped, without you it's impossible, and you're also the hero who should step up at a time like this, you're number one for a reason. He was a monster, and Endeavor laughed at the idea of referring to himself as a hero. I'm a hero, but I was too frail, and everyone would have perished if Midoriya hadn't been there. Now he's in a coma because the number one hero was too weak to fight Shigaraki, and the fact that Tuya turned out like this. I'm solely responsible, I was terrible, I don't deserve any pity or forgiveness. Every bit of pain I experience is something I deserve. He was my student, and I was responsible for his safety. Quote. Rei smiled sadly seeing him in such a vulnerable state of mind. Keep in mind that you are the father here, Enji. If you don't act, who will? Please, we'll all do this as a family, then we'll rebuild from there. I know you may never drop your guilt, but you can take a step in the right direction. This isn't how it has to end, she said. Mom's right. We can salvage this, even though it's not ideal. The Endeavor I know wouldn't be crying on his ass in a crisis, so man up and clean up your mess. Natsuo raised his voice. Natsuo, quote, especially you, we're in some serious trouble, but that's why we're a family, right? Despite our dysfunction, we will all overcome this. Are you in, then? The certainty in Natsuo's voice and the hope in his eyes bewildered Endeavor. Shoto added, albeit in a croaky voice. Yes, as Mom said, if you don't help us there's no way we'll solve this problem. This family has already gone through a lot of shit. You breaking down right now is the last thing we want. Shoto had never swore in public before, so they were all taken aback by his word choice, but it made sense. I swear to you all, I will do whatever it takes to fix all this. One member of the family was distressed as the others accepted their circumstances. Inko was paranoid and worried that her son would never awaken from his coma. Mrs. Midoriya, please don't say things like that, he's a strong young man. I think he'll persevere, All Might reassured her. But it's been 2 whole weeks, I know I'm not supposed to think like this, but I can't help it, she said sniffling. The door opened and Fuyumi peeped in. How is he doing? They both bowed their heads as she asked. All Might said in a low voice, he's still not shown any signs of waking up, but he looked up inquisitively. She was Endeavor's daughter, correct? I'm guessing you know young Midoriya, All Might queried. Fuyumi nodded and noticed Inko as well. Izuku's mother must be you. It's good to meet you both. My name is Fuyumi Todoroki, she said, making a slight bow. Inko and All Might both noticed that she was referring to him by his first name, which was undoubtedly the first time they had heard it. All Might arched an eyebrow in interest. Are you one of his friends? Inko asked. Well, in reality, I'm his girlfriend, Fuyumi said apprehensively, unsure of their response. Quiet, they both shouted simultaneously, and Inko was stunned. I'm guessing from your reaction that he didn't tell you. It's fine, I'm just surprised. So am I. Wait. That's it, All Might said with a snap of the finger. Well, that's what, both females asked. All Might smiled. The cause of young Midoriya's sudden exponential growth. You were the one. Fuyumi had a small blush at his comment. I wouldn't say that. But the reality is that you gave him the push he required. In all honesty, I'm happy for the two of you, he said earnestly, and Inko concurred. You don't mind. That I am, you know, older. Fuyumi asked, confused at how accepting Inko was. Anyway, it's none of my business, and I'm fine with Izuku liking you. Age is just a number, as they say, at least in most situations. Despite your current situation, I still want to thank you for checking in on him. It must be hard, and I'm glad Izuku has someone like you. Fuyumi bowed to them and grinned. I'll be taking my leave now. I will come to see him as soon as I can. She's a nice girl, All Might said as she left the room. Izuku was never one to look at girls, much less consider a relationship, so Inko acknowledged, it's still surprising that Izuku would have a girlfriend. Another person that was worried was Katsuki Bakugo, both for Izuku and Shoto. As much as he hated to admit it, they were both his friends and rivals. He was glad Shoto wasn't too injured, but Izuku was a different story altogether. He had woken up only to hear that the nerd had entered a coma. That nerd. If he dies I'll kill him. A few days passed again, with Fuyumi visiting occasionally, though there was no progress. One day however Izuku suddenly woke up with a jolt, startling the nurse who was there to check his vitals. Where am I? How come it's so bright? His eyes were still stunned by the intense light when he asked. The nurse scampered to get the doctor, and not long after his mother, and later All Might came rushing into his room. Inko cried her eyes out, begging him never to scare her like that ever again. All Might was happy, and relieved that Izuku was now awake, but with his awakening, came something else they weren't expecting. They grew increasingly perplexed as Izuku continued to explain it to them. You're expressing a desire to pursue All for One. Izuku gave a nod. I have to, right now he's weakened. And if I can find him then the heroes have a chance. All Might looked down. What if he's pursuing that? To keep you alone. Listen to All Might Izuku, this is crazy. I won't let you leave. He just woke up and was already considering putting himself in danger again, Inko said, her eyes welling with tears. I can't sit here and let All for One do whatever he wants with the lives of innocent people. The truth about One for All is no longer a secret. I can no longer allow him to do as he pleases because he has hurt people who were important to me and has affected all of my friends in one way or another. No more of this. Please Mom, I promise you I'll be careful, he said hugging his mother. Please be careful Izuku, Inko said giving in to her son's demand. In addition, please don't tell anyone that I'm awake, even though I know this sounds weird. They both gave him a startled look. I know, but if they know then I can't do what I plan to do. All Might said anxiously, I just hope you know what you're doing, young Midoriya. Izuku reassured them, I don't want innocent people getting hurt because I'm around. When Mineta ran in with a letter while Class 1A was in the dorms, they both grudgingly agreed to let him go, and Izuku did just that. Dude, I discovered a letter. Midoriya is here. They all rushed to him, as they saw the contents of the letter. Dear classmates, I wrote to let you know that I'm awake and doing well as to share with you a long-kept secret. All Might gave me my quirk, and since Shigaraki and All for One are pursuing me and I can't put any of you in danger, I've decided to leave UA. Please be careful. Midoriya Izuku, what the devil? Bakugo screamed in fury. Why would he choose this course of action? Shoto looked at the note with serious eyes. He did have an idea as to why, but still. I'm not sure, but we'll get him back. An entire week had passed since Izuku left, and his classmates were saddened by his departure. On another note, Fuyumi was both sad and pissed, not only because of his stupid decision, but that he didn't tell her he was awake. Concerned for his safety, she muttered to herself, stupid Izuku. Izuku had vanished entirely, leaving only a trail of frightened civilians and prisoners bound and turned over to the police, and a whole week had gone by since his departure, and even if they wanted to, they simply couldn't find him. In an alleyway a man was hanging dangerously off the side of a building, trembling and struggling to get free. A figure was seen standing over him, emerald green eyes glowing menacingly through the mask he was wearing. You'll start talking now. All for One is where? Izuku's departure caused a great deal of uncertainty among the students. They wondered where he was going, what he hoped to accomplish, and, perhaps most importantly, would he even return? Maybe not, because he was on a mission that drove him to obsession with All for One. He had no intention of returning until he had captured the villain. As the days stretched into 2 weeks, it became evident that Izuku had no intention of returning. His classmates looked for him non-stop, searching the streets for any sign of their missing friend, but he was elusive, a shadow in the night, and no one, not even the police, knew where he was. Meanwhile, Izuku's hunt for All for One and Shigaraki consumed him entirely. Gone were the days of cautious planning and strategic maneuvers. In their place stood a hero driven by desperation and rage, willing to do whatever it took to bring his enemies to justice. Izuku became an expert at interrogation, his methods becoming more violent and unrelenting, and no villain was immune to his wrath as he extracted information with a ferocity that verged on madness. The tactful persuasions of the past were replaced by a constant barrage of threats and intimidation. With every convict discovered, Izuku's methods became more and more drastic, and his classmates watched in alarm as they saw the toll it was taking on him, the darkness that threatened to consume him from within, but they persisted in believing that they could save him from the abyss. Their journey was not simple. Persuading the school administration to allow them to leave the security of UA was a drawn-out and difficult process, full of challenges and disappointments, but they were unfazed, their resolve unwavering as they argued their case. Izuku needs us now more than ever, Uraraka said, her voice resonating with conviction. We can't just sit here and do nothing. We must locate him. Her classmates nodded in agreement, their resolve mirrored in the determined set of their jaws. They had faced countless challenges together, overcome insurmountable odds. And now, they would face their greatest challenge yet, bringing their friend home. After a full week of negotiations, their perseverance finally paid off, and the school administration gave in and allowed them to search the nearby cities for their missing comrade. Izuku's classmates embarked on their mission with a mixture of hope and trepidation, determined to return him to his rightful place. As they made their way through the perilous streets of a shattered society in pursuit of any clue that might lead them to Izuku, they encountered danger at every turn. Nevertheless, they persevered, driven by the unwavering friendship that united them. Izuku carried a heavy burden with One for All and everything associated with it. Izuku Midoriya was more than just a classmate, he was a friend, a hero, and a ray of hope in a world engulfed in darkness, and they would not rest until he was safely by their side once more. As they faced the challenges that lay ahead, they knew that as long as they stood together, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. XXX. Grand, whose real name was Yoshindo, gritted his teeth and groggily rose from the rubble, still grinning at the villain despite his injuries, as two students from Ketsubutsu High were currently engaged in a fierce battle with a powerful foe, and for the most part he was winning. The villain sent one of them flying, then leapt out of the rubble, cackling with glee. "Is that all you have?" He was about to charge at her again when Shindo leapt on his back and slammed his palms into him, causing a huge vibration that ripped out some of the muscle fibers on him. This seemed to have a positive effect, but Muscular grinned maniacally before generating more muscle fibers to cover himself completely. Shindo was overwhelmed and punched hard, sending him flying, but Muscular wasn't done yet, and he jumped after his target, but suddenly there was a green spark of lightning and a loud bang, sending him rocketing back to the building from which he trembled with excitement. Muscular. The villain's eyes widened in shock, then in pure ecstasy. He recognized that voice. It was the one person who made him feel alive in a fight. "Midoriya, it's really you, finally. End the small fry," the villain yelled, jumping at his new opponent. Izuku dodged him and pushed him back again, creating distance between them, and dropping off Shindo by his teammate. "I'll inquire once more, all for one is where." Muscular took note of the tone in his voice. He wasn't kidding around. He grinned, stoked to go all out in a battle again. "I'll tell you if you fight me. How about that?" Izuku didn't seem to hear him, and he was about to say something else when a fist to his stomach blew out all the air in his lungs and threw him through the building. Muscular fell to his knees and coughed violently, his eyes widening in shock, and Izuku silently moved forward, stopping directly in front of him. "Where is he?" Izuku's eyes glowed ominously through the mask as Muscular roared in rage and broke free of his opponent's grip. Muscular ramped up his quirk to 100% and threw a punch that Izuku dodged, as if he had already seen it coming. He was then wrapped up in black tendrils and slung upwards through the roof and then down again. "I'm sick of these dumb games. If you don't excite me, I will kill you." As he grew larger and larger, Izuku still didn't move, but instead observed him carefully. He then finally spoke up. "So you're still not going to say anything? Extremely well." Izuku looked at the unconscious villain, who was now foaming in his mouth, but Muscular was unprepared for the speed at which Izuku moved, and before his muscles could spread around his body, he took a critical hit in the midsection, causing his eyes to roll into the back of his head and causing him to pass out. "I guess I used too much force on him." He restrained the villain, dragging him over to the police, where the other two heroes were being treated. Shindo sustained some damage, but luckily nothing too serious. Tatami on the other hand was relatively unharmed. She looked curiously at Izuku, who handed over Muscular to the villains, and she thought she recognized him. "You, where do I know you from?" she inquired. Izuku said, "I doubt that," before vanishing into a cloud of smoke. She glanced at the spot where he was standing and pondered. "I swear I've seen him somewhere before." Izuku continued to hunt for All for One, searching every corner, questioning any criminal he encountered, and was now under suspicion by the police and, consequently, the UA. He had gone days without sleep and had eaten very little during this time, most of which came from All Might, who insisted that he stay in contact with him. He knew that he would soon encounter another All for One lackey, though a hired gun was definitely not what he was anticipating. A bullet interrupted his rare meal, catching his attention right away, and he spun around and deflected another bullet, locking eyes with his new opponent, former pro hero and renowned marksman Lady Nagant. In contrast to her expectations, Izuku adopted his fighting stance instead of displaying any signs of fear. "You're the one he sent me after. You're just a kid," she remarked in a tone that suggested she was a little taken aback. Izuku turned to face her, his senses sharpened, and he had to reconsider his actions because one mistake could have disastrous consequences, and getting hurt was the last thing he wanted. He put out a thick smokescreen and leapt out of the way of another bullet, but like the last one, he had to deflect it as it curved towards him. "I'll get my answers from you then," he replied. He created distance between them, and thought on what to do. Well, it was pretty obvious. He had to disable her gun, but getting close enough without getting shot would be difficult. As Midoriya skillfully sidestepped Nagant's precise shots, he used his newly acquired combat awareness to disarm her and disable the sniper rifle. The confrontation culminated when Midoriya, driven by his unwavering determination to save people, attempted to assist her, but, like most All for One members, she was stabbed in the back. Her body imploded on itself, surprising him. This further drove him into a mindless observation with the villain at the center of his attention. All for One had to be stopped. Once more, he used someone as a pawn, a disposable tool. It was disgusting. Over the course of the following few days, he continued to push himself until All Might decided enough was enough and intervened. You seem to have had enough, young Midoriya. You look tired, All Might said, concerned for his student. I'm fine, All Might, I can keep going, Izuku denied. That's what you say, but the way you look says otherwise. You no longer have to face this alone, you need your friends and assistance. All Might tried to persuade him that he didn't have to do everything by himself, but Izuku was adamant that he would work alone. Eventually, Izuku left All Might with some unexpected remarks. I don't need you following me around anymore. Izuku kept searching for All for One, not even taking breaks for food or sleep, and it was becoming alarming because he was determined to find him, no matter where he was hiding, and his obsession with All for One was the only thing keeping him going. I'll track you down, All for One. Izuku could only cover his head, to at least limit the damage that his attackers were doing to him. He had come across villains which he defeated with force, but now in the face of Dictator. The villain, who was another foe sent after him by All for One, was controlling the movements of innocent people to attack him, knowing that the boy could not bring himself to harm them. Now hero, what will you do? You can free these people, but that would mean you hitting them. Isn't that inappropriate for a hero? He laughed. He was right, Izuku couldn't bring himself to harming civilians. The hits got harder over time, and his mask dropped to the ground. His mind was racing, trying to think of a way out, but the only option he could think of was to wait until the villain's quirk wore off. I can take this, he thought to himself. Boom! Izuku's eyes widened as he turned to face Bakugo, who had landed, and glared at him without showing any emotion as a massive shockwave with sufficient force to release them from their controller blew through the crowd. The hell were you thinking going off on your own? The blonde asked in an annoyed tone. Izuku's mask was down, revealing how exhausted he was. The others quickly caught up to them and gathered around him, worried about his condition, especially after seeing the bag under his eyes and the mud all over his hero suit, which looked terrible. This cannot be done by you alone. We don't need you to save us, Deku, Uraraka said sadly. The others came around, to talk him out of his mission. Izuku still didn't reply, but looked to the ground, refusing to look them in the eye. So what happens now? Where's that smile you should have in a crisis? Bakugo asked. I'm fine, Izuku replied, sitting up. He stumbled a bit, but caught himself, and finally looked at them. His gaze slightly hardened. That is blatantly false. You look awful. Why are you being so stubborn? Izuku stretched a bit, and yawned tiredly, but Bakugo grit his teeth, knowing the entire time that Izuku would not be going without a fight. We are still able to assist you, Iida remarked. You can't fight alone. Izuku shook his head and slowly put on his mask, his eyes glowing menacingly through it as the pressure around them increased and green lightning sparks erupted from his body. I won't ask again. Stay out of my way. His tone surprised them, and they were even more shocked when he burst into a cloud of smoke. Don't let him get away. Izuku was already in the air by the time the smoke cleared, but Bakugo was chasing after him when Bakugo yelled. How does it feel? Everyone feels extra strong now that you're this strong, don't they? Izuku refused to answer. Escape was his only option. He didn't want to fight and very possibly injure his friends. Class 1A were shocked at just how hard it was to pin him down. Despite his condition, tired, hungry and sleep-deprived, and he was still overpowering most of them. Nothing they tried worked. They tried stopping him head-on, but it was futile. The truth about how strong Izuku actually was became clear. He seemed like a completely different person from the one that left almost a month ago. Momo attempted to use sedatives to render him unconscious, but he broke free. Kaminari and Shoji then joined forces to try to render him unconscious, but just like the last time, he overcame it and managed to escape once more. Shoto used a giant ice pillar to trap him, but it quickly began to crumble with the power the boy was exuding. They were both struggling, one to keep his friend stagnant, and the other to break free. Midoriya, please stop. You don't have to bear this load by yourself. I learned the importance of others from you, and now you're breaking your own promise. Ice User said. I possess to go. Quote, consider the people who are important to you. I am aware of you and Fuyumi, Izuku. What do you think she'll think seeing you like this? Don't be so obstinate. Just let us assist you. Izuku resisted Shoto's attempts to reason with him and fought harder against the ice that was solidifying. I am unable to stop because of this. If I do. All for on. It's enough for one. What about you? You appear to be a complete mess. Put an end to this madness. Shoto yelled, cutting off Izuku. This obsession with all for one had to stop. Izuku started to break free from the ice, an almost psychotic look on his face. You guys, this is a battle between one for all and all for one. Can't keep up. Izuku used Fa Jin and Black Whip to generate enough energy to shoot himself away from them after shattering the ice pillar, but his classmates weren't going to give up so easily. Together, their peculiarities gave them enough speed to overtake him, and Iida took Izuku by the hand while uttering the same words that Izuku had previously told him. Izuku couldn't bring himself to fight back, or muster the strength to break free from Iida, though a part of him wanted to go back to his friends. He did want to go back, to get a break, to let go of everything. He used his float to gently lower them as they descended from the sky. Despite everything, Izuku remained upright, and his classmates were a little wary because he could easily flee if he so desired. You know, you're our friend. We're here to assist you, so don't go into fights by yourself. You may have one for all, but we can fight all for one together. Everyone, Mina remarked. Bakugo moved to face Izuku and spoke after he remained silent for a while, leading them to believe that nothing was reaching him. I've treated you like a jerk. I know that, even though it wasn't true, I've felt like you despise me since we were young. My ego blinded me, and I bullied you for it. It made me crazy to watch you get stronger every day after you got your quirk, and despite my best efforts to train, you were always better than me. I now realize that what I did was foolish and incorrect. You don't have to go about everything by yourself, Izuku. Please remember that we are here to help you in any way we can, which includes standing by your side during this battle. Simply return. Izuku's eyes widened, and then the exhaustion caught up with him. He collapsed, but Bakugo caught him, and for the first time in a long time, he shed tears. Izuku passed out, the weeks of unrelenting pursuit taking its toll on him. The others watched this with somber spirits. Bakugo said, bowing. Best Jeanist who had accompanied them was happy for them, that they managed to bring back their friend, however that was just one of their problems. Izuku woke up a while later, seeing the newly fortified walls of Ua, and then inside was quite the nasty surprise. The entire population yelled for him not to be let in. They are pursuing him. One shouted, yes, it's a bad idea to bring him here. Another added. Izuku crumbled under the pressure, the rejection. He couldn't take it, he was tired, he was weak, and his will was at an all-time low. Only his mother, Kota, and a woman he had previously assisted were there to console him. Uraraka took control of the situation and boldly voiced her opinions to his classmates, who were shocked and horrified by their actions. Izuku after persuasion was allowed in, and he was taken into the dorms to recover. He had just woken up from a deep sleep and sat down in the common room, bags under his eyes. Oh, you're awake, thank goodness, Momo said, noticing that he had woken up. They all gathered around him, not knowing what to say to him. The air was tense. Listen, I apologize for what I said and for going off on my own. I just didn't want anyone getting hurt on my behalf, he said apologetically. Isn't that why we're heroes? We fight for the sake of others. You are no exception, Midoriya, Iida said reassuringly. The class had a little closure, promising Izuku that he was not alone, and that they would all face all for one together. The doors to their dorms flew open, and in stepped a very angry-looking Fuyumi. Izuku's stomach dropped seeing her facial expression. She was not happy. Fui. Izuku was cut off by a slap, then she took him by the arm and dragged him outside. What was the purpose of that? Kirishima asked in confusion. Outside, Izuku was getting nervous, but then Fuyumi turned around and hugged him tight. It started as a sniffle, then she cried. She was feeling a lot of things. She was angry he didn't tell her he was awake, that he went off on his own to fight all for one. She was happy he was safe, and she was saddened at the burden he was carrying. You're such an idiot, she sniffled. Izuku worried about him and looked down, sad that he had made her sad. I'm sorry, Fuyumi, I really am, but with everything that happened, I couldn't bring you into more trouble, he said with a low tone. Just don't do something that dumb again, she said with a sigh. Recalling the sting of her slap, Izuku rubbed his face, realizing that he didn't want to experience that again. He laughed a little and said, I guess I deserved that. So, no more secrets. All right, no more secrets, he agreed. His classmates inside were wondering what the hell just happened. Why did Shoto's sister do that? What was going on? They would soon get their answers. Izuku and Fuyumi came back. As usual, his friends voiced out their curiosity. Is there a problem? They both appeared perplexed, and Izuku laughed a little when he realized that their secret was most likely out. You simply entered the room, gave him a slap, and dragged him away to an unknown location. Jiro twiddled her jacks and remarked, there aren't many options to take from there. I guess so. Let me introduce you to my girlfriend. Fuyumi Todoroki, Izuku said with a smile. It's nice to meet you all, she said with a bow. What? What? When? How? Kirishima yelled. Midoriya, you bastard. How could you betray us? The Mineta and Kaminari duo asked in outrage. Bakugo too was surprised, he certainly wasn't expecting anything like that. Did you know about this? Shoto calmly nodded when Mina asked. I did. No, it's not fair. Why does he get an older hottie? Kaminari freaked out and started to scream. I should probably get going, Izuku said as he left the room going up to his room. The commotion downstairs was still loud enough to hear from his room. He sighed and said, I hope this doesn't go on for long. His mind was still fuzzy, and he was still tired. He closed his eyes and drifted into the realm of the Sandman. After a long period of lack of sleep, he woke up the following morning with a moan, his body aching from the lack of sleep. He didn't even know he had slept till in the afternoon, but no one wanted to wake him up, he deserved the rest. Now that his mind was relatively back to normal, he realized one thing, he was hungry, and his stomach growled loudly in agreement to his thoughts. I'm so hungry. He slipped out of his bed and headed downstairs, greeting some of his friends along the way. While the others watched, he opened the kitchen and took out whatever he could find. Jiro muttered to no one in particular, this is weird. Izuku had taken a huge bite of a broccoli and then downed it with a jug of milk. That's disgusting. Toru gagged as he spoke. Is he to blame? He probably hasn't eaten in a while, Momo said with a chuckle. Izuku continued to ransack the fridge, amazing them at how the human palate seemed not to care about the absolutely absurd combination of flavors due to hunger. Some were downright disturbing, he would probably pay the price for that later on when his stomach came to its senses. At the end, he almost emptied the fridge, surprising his classmates at just how much he ate. He eats like a Saiyan, Sato remarked. Izuku was finally full, and laid down on the couch and passed out again. Izuku slept all day, till later that evening. He woke up to see the dorms empty. Where is all of them? He asked no one in particular. After searching without finding anyone, he came across a note. We went for a strategy meeting, be back soon. XOXO. I guess I'm alone then, he said to himself. Fuyumi entered the dorms as the door opened. Hey Izu, I dropped by to check on you. How are you doing? His girlfriend asked with a warm smile, as she noticed he no longer had bags under his eyes, at least they weren't as pronounced as before. I'm better, you. He smiled at her and asked. She pulled off her jacket and sat next to him, nodding at his question, but Izuku wasn't really satisfied with the answer. Are you, Fuyumi, actually okay? I learned about the incident while I was trying to be Batman, she concluded. They both chuckled a little, and Izuku touched her hand. You can speak with me, you know. I'm available to you. I know Izu, I know, she sighed leaning against him. It felt nice, just the two of them. Izuku's heart was pounding however. He had never been this close to her, surely he wasn't the only one that was nervous, right? Thump, thump. Fuyumi felt his heart beat faster and smiled. Izuku was so pure, it was almost too good to be true, and that was exactly the case. It was too good to be true, because right now he was going down the rabbit hole. Your heart's racing, she stated. Izuku chuckled, and squeezed her hand softly. Izuku, well, kiss me. His breath hitched, and he slowly nodded. They both leaned in and kissed very lightly. Something was off though, they hadn't gone past this, and both wanted nothing more than to rip that barrier apart. Izuku kissed her again, but this time they held it for a little longer. Not there yet. They traced the lines of each other's lips as they kissed once more. Almost there. They broke up for air and went back again, this time breaking the barrier. Fuyumi slipped her tongue into his mouth and straddled him. Izuku groaned at the new sensation, it was unlike anything he had ever felt before. They eventually broke apart for the necessary breath of air. Their bodies were burning with passion, their eyes clouded, and they were both panting. Izu, it's poking me, Fuyumi whispered to him. Izuku's face went white for a moment, then red. She didn't get off him even after pointing out his predicament. It was a strange sensation, but she enjoyed it, and it was a normal reaction. Fuyumi, what are you doing? Fuck. Hearing him swear was uncharacteristic for him, and her ears perked up. Fuyumi found herself slowly grinding against Izuku, and both of their breaths caught. It feels big. For a brief moment, she had a naughty thought, but fortunately, they both snapped out of their brief daze. That was, nice, Izuku concluded. When his friends returned a short while later, Fuyumi had already left and had successfully put Small Might to sleep. He just had another new experience in his life, probably his best one in a long time. You seem chipper, Deku, Uraraka said. She was absolutely devastated when he introduced Fuyumi as his girlfriend. She had lost him, but she didn't want to let that ruin their friendship. He didn't know about how she felt, and she wasn't going to tell him. It's for the best, she thought to herself. I guess so. I'm feeling much better than yesterday, he said with a chuckle. Let's be real, dude, you've gotten a bit up, like we had such a hard time just catching you, Kirishima said. Shiro grinned and said, yeah, I suppose that means we'll just have to catch up. Izuku smiled back at them, though feeling a little guilty for making them go through such a hassle. Later that day, Fuyumi sent Izuku a text. Fuyumi. Hey, so my mom wants to meet you. He blinked. What? Izuku. Seriously, Fuyumi. Like seriously, she's actually wanted to for a while now. Izuku. Alright, so now that you've told me, I'll admit that I'm anxious. Fuyumi. Ah, don't be. My mom doesn't bite, she's really nice. Izuku. I'll take your word for it. XXX. Izuku thought, oh man, as he sat in front of Rei Todoroki. Even though she exuded kindness, he was still anxious, somehow even more so than he had been with Endeavor. Should I call you Izuku, or Midoriya? She asked with a soft tone. Anyone is fine, ma'am. Rei chuckled, seeing how rigid the boy was, and gave him a reassuring smile. Please do not hesitate. I only wanted to meet you because I had heard so much about you from Shoto and Fuyumi. Izuku nodded but remained silent. Also, thank you for helping Shoto. I was actually able to watch your fight with him, and to see him embrace his power was something that made me happy. And now Fuyumi seems much happier because of you. Perhaps it was fate that you would cross paths with our family. I believe you had a positive impact in us, in Enji, Natsuo, Fuyumi and Shoto. Izuku, I appreciate you being there. It's something I've always wanted to do. Sometimes people tend to focus too much on fighting villains as hero work. While it may have been me meddling in where I wasn't supposed to, I was glad I helped out somehow. If I have made even a small positive change in someone else's life, then my job as a hero is done. Rei gave him a kind smile. There's something I'd also like to ask you, Izuku. Izuku's ears perked up. What might that be? He raised an eyebrow in question. Are you the secret love child of All Might? At long last, the Great War was over. The heroes had won, but at a steep price. Shigaraki had been defeated, All for One vanquished, but it wasn't without any casualties. The most notable being the deaths of not only All Might, but Endeavor. Two major blows to Japan, and the world at large. In order to buy time for his successor, All Might came out of retirement for one last stand against his lifelong foe. Izuku arrived too late, and All Might was killed, but Bakugo stepped up and defeated All for One after being placed on the verge of death himself. Even though All Might would always live through One for All, it would never be the same. Shoto also had a difficult time, with his entire family grieving the loss of Enji Todoroki. It broke him to see his mentor, his idol, and a father figure dead. Endeavor sacrificed himself to take down his own son Intuya, in his final act of redemption. Rebuilding the entire country took time, but progress was being made. Izuku stood by his girlfriend at Endeavor's funeral. She gripped his hand tightly as he was lowered into the ground, taking in the last sight of her father. She broke down and couldn't contain her tears, but Izuku was there to console her. Even though he wasn't doing well, he had to be strong, and he assured All Might and Endeavor that he would continue to be a pillar to support his loved ones. Shoto and Natsuo also shed tears for their father, both vowing to carry on his will in them. Rei was at a loss for words, but it was clear that she was sad. Could all of this have been prevented? Unfortunately, there was no answer to that question. They paid their last respects and eventually everyone started to leave, except for Izuku, who moved elsewhere to the grave of All Might. The place was still covered with fresh flowers, and evidence of the people's adoration for the great hero even in death. He sat there in the rain, the downpour masking his tears. I don't know what to do, All Might. We won, but at what cost? He didn't ask anyone specifically. A few people noticed him there, but they didn't want to interrupt him while he was thinking. One of these individuals was Aizawa, who recognized the importance of All Might to his pupil. The man was essentially his father, and halted when he saw a white-haired woman approach him slowly and take a seat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. Izuku put his arm around her and they silently consoled one another. Unusually, Aizawa gave a small smile and turned to leave, pleased that his student had found someone to turn to in such a dire situation. Take care, problem child. UA was never the same after that. Izuku Midoriya left the school and for a while no one knew where he was. He completely disappeared from the face of the earth. His classmates were in shock when the news was passed to them. What do you mean he's not coming back? Sue asked worried. I don't know the specific details, but he said he wasn't going to continue at UA, and I think it's the right choice. He needs a break from everything. This war has cost him too much, Aizawa remarked. It's not going to be the same without him though, Jiro said sadly. Yeah, it certainly is an unexpected shock, Momo added. Shoto didn't say anything, having known all the while that Izuku was not going to come back to UA, but he decided that he should be the one to tell them on his own terms. I can agree to that, however, look alive. He'll be back someday, and you all still have an entire year ahead of you, so make the best of it. I am aware that this war has altered things in ways that we will never be able to change. Even though we have lost mentors, friends, and comrades, we should still strive to be the greatest heroes we can be. Their wishes will be reflected in our hearts and deeds. You wouldn't want to disappoint our friends, would you? Aizawa asked, grinning a little. Hell no, the class roared back, full of renewed vigor and determination. Aizawa grinned to himself, pleased that he had lifted their spirits. They needed the support, especially at this time. The road ahead was a difficult one that centered on restoring and re-establishing the honor of heroes in a society that had been shattered. Without Midoriya, let's see how they do. XXX. The only people who seemed to know where Izuku was were his mother and Fuyumi. After that day, they heard nothing about him, and the majority of the public wondered where in the world he could be. School passed peacefully, and soon their class graduated and were about to be fully fledged heroes. They had gone through the year, with each of them finally crowned as fully fledged heroes. And finally their journey through UA had come to an end, which was saddening. Throughout their time there, they felt like family. All the joy, sorrow, and fear, they all went through them together. The preparations for their graduation was somber, but at the same time exciting. They would all face the world's problems, each with their part to fix. On the day of graduation, which was a bittersweet occasion, Class 1A was about to leave for the ceremony when they heard a familiar voice. Hey guys, it's been a while. Shoto smiled at his sister. It had been a while since he last saw her in person, but she didn't really look any different, apart from her hair being visibly longer. The person who walked in behind her, however, was a different case. Green hair as unruly as ever, emerald green eyes glowing brightly, and the smile they hadn't seen in such a long time. He laughed and rubbed the back of his head, saying, "Hope I'm not late." Midoriya. He was rushed by his friends who were overjoyed to see him. Dude, look at you, now you're all manly, Kirishima exclaimed. The hell have you been eating? Mina asked in shock at how much he had changed. Izuku did have a long overdue growth spurt, quite a few of them in fact. It's good to see you again, Izuku, Shoto said with a smile. Izuku smiled at his friend, then felt a strong palm on his shoulder. It was Bakugo. A heads up would be nice next time. Don't go disappearing without telling me again, he said in a cheerful but low voice. I'm back now, and I won't be going anywhere, Izuku said. It's good to see you again, problem child, Aizawa said, happy to see that his student was doing well. Aizawa-sensei, it's nice to be back. The man raised his voice after clearing his throat. I want to formally congratulate you all and let you know that I'm proud of you now that my class is over. I didn't think much of you when I first woke up because of the commotion you were creating. In fact, I wanted to immediately kick you all out. It was undoubtedly the most fascinating class he had ever taken. His remarks were greeted with a fit of laughter, and he couldn't help but laugh at the memories. But as time passed, I came to see the drive in each and every one of you, and the determination you all showed when it mattered the most. I was hard on you, because I wanted each of you to prove that I wasn't wrong to believe in you, and happy to say that you all passed with flying colors. These 3 years I have taught you, but I also learned a lot from you. I feel privileged to have taught you, so go out there and prove to the world what Class A is capable of. Yeah, no one noticed, but Aizawa's eyes were a little glossy from emotion. It was as though he was watching his chicks leave the nest and wished them the best. He had grown quite fond of his students. They were all like family to him, and he was proud to have taught them. These fucking children, really gonna make me cry, he thought in amusement. Their graduation became even better with the return of one of their friends. He was still and will always be a part of their class. He and Fuyumi watched them all with giggles, and then the crowd went into a full-on laughing spree when Bakugo gave his speech. Izuku laughed and remarked, "That's typical Kacchan." Izuku laughed and looked up thoughtfully as Fuyumi nudged him in the side and said, "Makes me wonder what you would have said if you had stayed." "Yes, now that you mention it, I would most likely be a shaking mess." He sighed and said, "I'm still not good with speaking," which made them both laugh. He ran his hand through his hair and they both noticed that it was completely white at the base. His classmates hadn't noticed it, and he wasn't sure when he would tell them the truth, but he would someday. "Wow, that's crazy. Who would have thought?" he asked with a detached expression in his eyes, and Fuyumi laughed. Despite the circumstances, she was certain that he had moved on from it, but she was also certain that he would never truly forget it because, at the end of the day, the man was his father. Like some classic anime trope, she said in amusement. Izuku's eyes lit up and he turned to his girlfriend with a cheeky smirk. He started, "You know today's technically my graduation too." Fuyumi gave him a somewhat perplexed look before beginning to flush as he made a tiny motion. Well I mean. He abruptly started laughing and said, "I don't mind," as she looked away from him. "I didn't mean that, Fuyumi, you've got quite the imagination," he said with a small smirk. Fuyumi huffed and looked away, read out of embarrassment at how perverted her mind was. Her phone buzzed, and she looked at it, then turned to Izuku who feigned ignorance. Her red face seemed to redden even more as she read the message, but then looked back to him and smiled. "I can do that."
So this was it for the series. I hope you enjoyed it. To watch more series like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, bye bye.